Hey everybody, excuse me. Welcome to our final session of the day. I'm happy to introduce our last presenter, Colyn DeGraaff. He is a seasoned communications professional with over a decade's worth of experience in marketing, e-learning, and creative design. He has directed marketing campaigns across 27 states and 4 countries and led content, web, social, and digital marketing on a range of critical projects, including newcomer education. He received his master's degree in international and intercultural communications in 2019 and currently works as the demand generation manager for Smart Technologies, as well as the creative director of the publishing house Cold Open Stories. So without further ado, welcome Colyn. Thank you for presenting today.
Thank you for having me. It's back to an old stomping grounds. And hello to everyone else on the call. Great to see a lot of familiar faces and names in the chat. Back here today, talking a little bit about leadership and storytelling. Again, Whitney, thank you for the great introduction. I was on board back, oh my gosh, happy birthday ties with 10 years of e-learning. I was there at the beginning of the onset of it, and it's so great to see how it's grown. And really, in coming in to talk today, I want to talk a little bit about how, with 10 years of instruction, you have to take a look at the inception, the stewardship, as well as the future for how you continue e-learning, or maybe as a learner, jump on board to a program like this. I'll be talking about 10 traits that are needed to be a learning administrator, or that are actually valuable for everyday students, or for those of you looking to advance your career could be helpful as well. So a little bit as we get started here, move to next. Oh, hold on, there we go. So back in 2017, I was at a post-conference event and someone asked me this question: what do you do for work? Now, when you work in nonprofit, you tend to wear a lot of hats. So I kind of flubbed out an answer. It's like, oh, I oversee e-learning, I run a website, I work with teachers, I do graphic design, I write proposals, I run social media, I do a little bit of everything because you kind of have to in nonprofit. We're in a society filled with specialists. And so a generalist answer like this is at the best confusing. And at the worst, I didn't do a very good job of selling myself because it didn't sound like I had an actual job. It just sounded like I did a little bit of stuff, this, that, and the other. So when you're introduced to someone for the very first time, this is one of the questions you're most likely to get. What do you do for work? And while it seems like a little bit of a harmless icebreaker, there is a tendency to associate who we are with what we do, and central to the stories that we tell and the leaders that we're seen to be. So funnily enough, also in 2017, there was a hashtag that started trending that spoke to the shared experience. It was called #BadlyExplainYourJob. Now, others like myself were poking fun at the ways that we are asked to describe ourselves. So here's an example or two. What job title, and you can use the chat as well, by reading this, what job do you think that this person has? This is an easy one. I talk to myself in front of large numbers of young people busy on their smartphones. #BadlyExplainYourJob. You can probably guess, Professor Hey there, teacher, or lecturer. All right, let's check the next one. I make people smile and then I shoot them. Occasionally, I flash them as well. #BadlyExplainYourJob. If you guessed photographer, videographer, good answer. After kids tell me where it hurts, I push on the part that hurts while asking if it hurts. #BadlyExplainYourJob. Pediatrician, if anyone knows any. What do you do for work is a loaded question. Now, for opportunists, it can be a power move, a way to assert your status or promote prestige. And in Western success-driven cultures, it's valued and is often a way of touting we are what we do, as actually being, how much money do you make? Or is what you do significant? Counter to this, through economic and migratory displacement, newcomers are forced to uproot their social connections, professional roots, and this question can be a daunting one to respond to. What do you do? Newcomers must constantly respond to this. It's asked over and over when making new social connections, answering immigration officers, applying for a job. And this is kind of central to the story that we start to tell ourselves. When I tell you what I do, and if there's an expectation of a financial value to it, or some sort of sense of worth or place, and I don't feel that it can compare, that can have a lot of impact on my confidence, on the leadership, and the stories that I tell about myself. And the way we answer in the fear of stigma can often leave us feeling lesser than the company that we're with. So similar to this, when we talk about e-learning and the shift to blended and online learning, stories of the way that we talk about our jobs has changed. E-learning 10 years ago could have been seen as something as a bit of a nuance, or a, how could that possibly work? How can you possibly learn on the internet? Storytelling in e-learning years ago played a larger role in driving funder organization and buy-in by improving options to programming, but there were a lot of questions that I remember hearing. How could this possibly work? How are your outcomes going to ever be as good as what you would see in person? How can a person reach out through the internet and build social connections? The stories we had to tell then about how well we were creating, new and improved benchmarks, how long were students staying in the program, how easy was the curriculum to design, why was more money needed? These were very difficult for people who couldn't understand the story that existed in the context of the time. Fast forward to the last 3 years, I think a lot of us have come to see the value that e-learning comes to represent. Specifically when we talk about distance learning because of the inaccessibility of flights or travel with countries that are under lockdown, in terms of being able to reach out and communicate with people who are trying to connect with their grandparents or parents who are in medical care because you're not allowed to visit. Or it's people who are trying to juggle multiple jobs because the economy is having difficulties. You need to work multiple different shifts, and then you have to do learning at night online because there's no classes that you can attend that late. So these are all things that have changed in 10 years. And upon reflection, it's kind of crazy to even look at the stories that we would tell about e-learning then and now. But there are some things that I learned back then, things that I'm sure that everyone working within TIE's e-learning department, as well as people who want to help steward it into the future, there's going to be 10 traits that you'll want to keep in mind. Now, this goes into becoming a leader. Effective leadership is characterized by effective communication. Skilled leaders are by necessity required to be effective communicators, and therefore the manager who is a skilled storyteller will, in all likelihood, be a more effective leader. Because the stories have been used to connect people. We hear this all the time of back in humanity's early days, rounding around a campfire. But stories are used to teach, to train, to bring people on board, to enlighten people, importantly, to boost morale and motivate. So incorporating storytelling requires a leader to look inside themselves and be open about topics that are relatable to employees. And when it comes to teachers and students, feeling that there's a sense of trust, and we'll get more on that later, to be able to have these stories, to be able to open up and have a level playing field for understanding the human experience. So today I'm going to give you 10 traits for that'll hopefully help you tell more compelling stories, as well as 10 traits that can help you communicate like a leader, whether you are a student, someone who's recently landed, or someone who wants to advance in their career. So the first trait of a leader is optimism. Research indicates that optimism is a crucial differentiator between a successful leader and others in the workplace. In a study by Coutts and Posner, they began looking at the critical successes for leadership and forward thinking. And many people want to follow a leader who believes that today's challenges and hard work will lead to a more successful tomorrow. Coutts and Posner weren't the only researchers to reveal the value of optimistic leaders. Sanger and Folkman looked at leaders who scored at or above the 99th percentile on innovation with a 360-degree feedback survey. Their peers, direct reports, and managers would often describe optimism as the most important component of having a leader that you would want to follow. This is a soft skill. This is a value add. Now, when we talk about e-learning, being optimistic sets the right tone rather than being pessimistic and having no faith in what you're doing. Oh, how could online learning possibly work? Just right out of the gate, you have to have the optimism that just because you're trying something different doesn't mean that it's innately going to fail. Employees want to work for someone who believes in their ideas and looks at situations positively. Instead of panicking, a good leader must plan their next move during the time of stress. So if, for example, you have a teacher And this all happens, but if someone gets stuck on mute, and we may have experienced that over the presentations today, don't panic. Have the optimism that you'll be able to sort out the technical problem in a short amount of time. Another trait is courage. The greatest leaders take risks and aren't afraid of failure. They don't play it safe. They step out of their comfort zone. They try new methods, and they pick themselves back up if things don't work out the way they planned. This is a very common trait when we talk about online learning and instruction. Whether it's adding new modules or widgets that you think would be great and then find out that many student devices are not compatible with them. Or maybe it's when you are doing a backup and the backup goes missing and you're hoping that by the next refresh, things will be saved. It can also be taking larger risks, whether it's to say launching an online program that teaches English versus an online program that does employment or other sorts of job training that maybe hasn't been seen or done within a city, province, or country before. Growth requires risk. Risk requires courage. Even the biggest ideas are possible if you work hard and smart. And seeing 10 years of growth in the way that this program has continued, I am very happy to see that people like Whitney and other members of the team who were involved have had the courage to continue moving forward, to admit when things aren't working, don't hide mistakes, iterate and improve. Next one is focus. Decide what the few most important priorities are and focus on them. One thing that was always a challenge for me was trying to communicate those priorities repeatedly to the team. This is where we want to go, and this is how we're getting there. It can be a very difficult thing for a leader who might have all of the solutions in their head to actually communicate, to verbalize them, and make sure that they are clear. And again, with focus, don't focus on the small projects that give back little in return. Instead, focus on the big projects that can produce bigger, beneficial results. We might spend a lot of time trying to fix those exact same 3 columns in an Excel document when maybe we should have been writing the proposal. Another is decisiveness. Now, there's a difference between making impulsive decisions and making smart decisions. And I will freely admit that I am action-oriented, and I think that decision is one of the traits that I love to follow. It is also the one that can get me in the most amount of trouble. Good leaders want to go for the latter, not the idea that they're going to be making a rash decision, but one that is well-informed. You will never have enough information to reach 100% certainty, ever. The best that you can do is recognize that there is always an innate level of risk, be guided by the facts that you have, and trust your instincts. Even if you are 99% sure and that 1% proves that something can go awry, life does happen. But with some decisiveness, ideally you'll be able to use the data and the preparation, the planning you had to continue to make adjustments and move forward. Now it's time for my favorite one. Curiosity. Seek to understand new ideas and people. I think this is central to a lot of individuals who work within the immigration service sector, that you are always meeting new people, always hearing new ideas. But it was interesting 10 years ago to see that e-learning was not being as quickly embraced for new ideas. And the reason for that, I think, is that innovation requires learning. You don't know what you don't know. Curiosity also leads to questions. Asking questions helps individuals gain knowledge and improve the work that they produce. Another trait is fairness. Fairness in treating people with kindness gains their respect and the respect of others. A good leader should treat their employees how they want to be treated. Hostility, rudeness, and inequality can leave a sour note on a company's reputation. But also when it comes to fairness, we are working with populations that are seeing a lot more stigma and discrimination, whether it's in their everyday life, taking transit, on the job. And so when they come to a place for e-learning where maybe this is one of the very few positive social connections that they have, whether it's with the e-learning instructor or a conversation circle, You want to make sure that you're giving everyone equitable time to speak and that they are having the ability to tell their story. By treating these people fairly and decently, you can be empathetic and give people a second chance to communicate where maybe they didn't have the opportunity before. Another trait that this comes out of is thoughtfulness. Science has proven that over time, we become less open-minded and dismissive of others' opinions due to the hardening of our biases. This is why we see a lot of CEOs and senior decision makers stay on long before they should be allowed to make agile decisions. An example that I remember seeing recently was Bob Iger, president of the Walt Disney Company, recognizing that it was his time to leave when he had started to cut people off and dismiss opinions out of turn. Be informed in your opinions, but admit when you don't know something and learn to close that gap quickly. Also know when it's time to step away and allow others to fill the void. This is one that is very challenging. Authenticity. Being real and honest gains you trust. Don't try to be someone that you're not. It's easier to be yourself. That's who you were born with. Authenticity comes with originality and different ideas, but that's not a bad thing. Be honest and don't fake it. People will trust and respect you even if they don't like what you have to say. If you're explaining a difficult decision, like explaining your thought process honestly or negotiating, explain clearly at the start what you're looking for. And don't create false expectations and then go back on them later. Pursuing perfection is knowing what's right and wrong and what it means to you. Set a high ethical bar for everything that you do, big or small. There's a great quote that the way you do anything is the way that you do everything. Integrity. Success depends on setting standards for all things big and small, and a good leader has to demand integrity from their people and products at all times, even when it results in difficult conversations. So there's 10 traits. I hope that one of them resonated with you. The next time someone asks, what do you do? A personal recommendation would not be to say, oh, I work on this or I'm that. You could say something that uses the 10 traits to say, well, I stay curious. I pursue perfection. I value honesty. In comparison, instead of asking someone what they do, you can also ask, what have you been up to lately? What values are you most involved in? Open the door to conversations about values and deeper concerns rather than unfair judgments based on the work or job that a person has. It's an exercise in empathy that comes across as more meaningful and hopefully will allow you to have more intentional and less critical conversations. So with this in mind, I'm a big fan of conversations rather than me chatting at people. So I want to open the door to have a conversation with everyone about the 10 traits. And we'll jump right back to the first one here and see if anyone has any stories or any questions about how to lead with optimism.
Does anyone have any thoughts or any questions for Colin on this?
I can share a story about optimism that I needed to hear so that I could go forward, not my own optimism. Mm-hmm. But I know that when when the pandemic first happened and we had to switch everyone to online, I said, there's no way we can do it with the literacy students. And the leadership at my organization, and I think particularly Sally, was, yes, we can do it. We can do it. And we did it. So I just felt like, nah, there's no way it's not going to happen. So that leadership style impacted my work and helped me to achieve the goal that I really wanted, which was to maintain a class of literacy learners, regardless as to pandemic or not.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome. Hi, Colin.
Hello. I think that's a fantastic point as well, as just to say that how that optimism comes. Chances are you've now carried that optimism with you and shared it with your students. You know, that you've adopted that, because for all of these traits, what you receive is easier to give. If someone is giving you that optimism, you can internalize that and be able to carry it on to your students. And chances are they've probably seen that as well. Everyone knows what a bad teacher walks in the door. You know, walk in, throw the books on the desk, sling off the bag, sits down, leans back, exhales exhausted, even before anything has even started. So I think that's a great example. Thank you so much.
Colyn, thank you so much for coming back.
Hi, Sally.
So nice to see you.
Good to see
Sorry,
you.
couldn't give you a hug, but thank you so much. And for any of you are new to TIES, and you know, in my remarks, I mentioned the first coordinator of TIES first e-learning program, this guy. This is the guy who has helped develop quite a few e-learning programs at TIES. So, and he's still coming back to visit TIES, give this presentation. Colyn, I don't have a story to share. Well, I have a lot of stories, but I don't think, you know, a lot of time for me to share. But I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
What would you do if on your leadership team, you do have leaders who always are opposite? They see, you know, dark side of pretty much everything. If you talk about something, they always see the pessimistic side. What would you do in that case?
I think part of the reason for people looking at all negatives is that there's a bit of a conditioning that people aren't born pessimistic, is my belief. I believe that through experience, through negative consequences of former actions, is much easier to become pessimistic and assume that things are potentially worse than they are. We also live at a time where the assumed consequences, the assumed negative consequences, because we're surrounded, at least online, with a hyper, you know, an elevated example of reality. Everything is bad or worse. So it's a lot easier to internalize that as well. I think one of the ways to address that optimism is, unfortunately, it's not something that can easily be done in a group setting unless everyone else is on board. Unless you have multiple people who are also coming forward and sharing an optimism and sharing the confidence, I would recommend that, you know, is everyone on the same table, you know, or is it just one person that is lacking that optimism? If you are surrounded by more people who are optimistic, it does create a better sense of a safe space and a better sense of trust that things will go right because everyone else is able to share in that vision. Now, provided that that is not working quickly, understanding everyone's growth is on a different highway, can take different time to get from point A to point B. Another thing is just being able to communicate with them off the side, sit down with them and say, hey, when it comes to this, what's keeping you up at night? Try to get a better understanding if it's the strategy or if it's the tactics that are creating a lack of optimism for them. Is it the idea and the vision, or is it some tactical execution? To be able to unpack that and see where a lack of optimism usually comes from a sense of fear and needing that reassurance. So try to figure out actually where that's coming from.
May I also participate in this part of the conversation?
I won't stop you.
I also think that a leadership team it's very important to have people who are not optimistic, who are going to demonstrate to you the challenges that you may face and who have a more realistic, perhaps more realistic picture. So like, okay, we can't do this because of this and this reason, because there's also, I feel like, in our generation, there's this cult of positivity and we're all like, we can do it. I think sometimes the negativity is indicative of a deeper consideration of a project. So I think it's important to have those people, at least one person on your leadership team who presents those challenges so you know how to defend them and respond to them and have clearly thought of all those challenges yourself.
I would agree to that, Donna. I think the only thing that I would contrast that comment with, though, is that I don't want to mistake optimism for in any other word, critique. I think that you can still be optimistic in critique. I think where, and potentially, Sally, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talk about optimism, it's the idea that no, I can't, or no, we can't, rather than a consideration. I don't think this will work, but because that but or that and being able to rebuttal and back things up is where you do have some multi-generational differences of a sort of yes cult, as you said, or people who are, you go online, you go on the internet, and even people younger than any of us here on the call, you do see that there's a lot of like, the internet sucks, right? It's kind of terrible just because everything out there has a gloom and has a negativity of it. So how do you stay positive in that fact when you can turn on you hop on TikTok and you better be hoping that you're getting cute animals because everything else is bad news. So I think just in that regard, being able to figure out where that trust and it's the difference between negativity and someone who feels defeated. I think you can still be optimistic without being defeated.
Thank you for all the insights. I think Donna made a very good point. I don't think what Donna mentioned that type is pessimistic, because that is realistic. I think try to help analyze, right? And what the barriers might be, what the challenges might be, so you can be better prepared. I'm appreciative of that one. And there's another type, though. I found there's another type because in their mind, they already made their mind. About the negativity, something cannot be realized or cannot come true. The decision already there. And they try to find all the evidence to prove, see, it's not going right. See, it's not happening. I think that is more opposite. But what Donna mentioned, I really appreciate. I think, Donna, you're right. We need to have those kind of realistic person on the leadership, because always, help you to see the part you don't see, right? So, and see, maybe this barrier, maybe that challenge, maybe this could happen. That is really helpful. Thank you so much.
I would agree. And I would say that trait actually leads to the next one. It's just the courage, the ability to step out and say, hey, look, I'm going to have a difficult conversation about a certain topic, a subject, something, and being able to stand up for that. I think you're embracing a risk, but acknowledging that there is risk. On that note, we have courage. I'd be curious if anyone else on the call, because I see a couple other faces as well. I'd be curious if anyone else has any thoughts on the different traits, or if something resonated with you on the type of leader that you feel that you want to be.
Hello, Colyn. May you please speak? Nice to see you.
Hi, Irina.
Well, I would like to touch upon the experiences during the pandemic. So, and speaking about the leadership during the pandemic, because I feel like the majority of us found the traits we didn't know about. So, and I'll speak about myself. Yes, I was at the very beginning, I was very pessimistic about the online delivery and getting in one night from on-site to online. But then the optimistic thoughts and the optimistic views that I got from the team that I was working with, plus the experiences of our learners, brought me to the idea that everything is possible if we are doing it as a team. So at the same time, I would like to say that if we hadn't been courageous enough, we wouldn't have succeeded. So technically, a bit of a pessimism, a bit of the optimism, and a bit of a realism is very healthy at the work environment. I just feel like we need to balance it. So if you are very pessimistic and you have a leader who is pessimistic, I don't think that the team will succeed. I feel like the strong leadership is about being realistic, but at the same time experience pessimism and optimism. But the percentage should be a bit of equal, right? So it's always a good idea to be optimistic and think positive, but at the same time, we need to understand the realia. And in the non-for-profit sector, the realia is different on a daily basis, and we know that it's ups and downs depending on the funders we're working with, depending with the communities we're working with. So speaking about everything, so I would say that speaking about myself, I found some new traits that that I have, and I'm trying to be optimistic. Whatever is happening, I'm trying to be optimistic. Thank you so much for touching upon this topic. Very important.
Well, thank you, Irina. And I think that just also goes to show that leadership is not a job title. Leadership is a mindset that you have to adopt for yourself and be able to incorporate it with the people that you work, lateral to, or people that you're managing or working under. I think that there's a great thing there is that also the fear of failure. And I've seen this in nonprofit as well as in business, is that there is actually a value to failure. You do discover what does not work, and you're able to then pivot and make improvements on it. One of the stories that I feel comfortable in sharing is just being able to move out of nonprofit into business and understanding the stakes and the expectations of funding and what money is being spent on. Within nonprofit, you're very considerate to the fact that you are spending government dollars or community organization and making sure that you're using money wisely. I don't think it's any point that there's the myth that business will just shell out the cash to see a lot easier than you might see in nonprofit. That said, you still carry with you that fear of failure, but understanding that if you can actually own any mistakes, be able to communicate them, whether it's to a funder to say, look, this didn't work, we wouldn't recommend doing that in the future. They can learn from that. You can turn your mistakes into a story that can also help other people and grow. There's several of these that are coming out in the city now, expletive name, but we'll just call them screw up nights, where people are getting together and they're talking about the things that they have failed at or sucked at and they aren't going well. And one of the most powerful ones that I heard was about a leader here in Calgary, who they went ahead and they ran an ad campaign. And when they put it into market, they had the courage. They're like, we're going to do something bold. We're going to do something daring. But along the way, they kind of lost the focus of what they needed to work on. And they ended up being impulsive. It was the decisiveness, which was valued, but the impulsivity became a problem. And in the end, they ran an ad campaign without checking to see about, well, was any part of this a trademark? Or was any part of this actually owned by anyone? And the next day or the weekend, it was a Sunday afternoon. I remember her saying at 2 p.m., she gets a call from their CEO asking, can you please explain to me why we have a lawsuit for $250,000 sitting in my inbox? Terrifying. But she also was able to admit, to say, I made a mistake. And you go, in any other circumstance, these are high stakes and these are high consequences. But because she also then had the decisiveness to reach out and communicate with the owners of that trademark, they were able to work on something together and the consequences were lessened. That fear of something going wrong always has a kernel of opportunity that you might be able to use it to turn into a conversation and do something with it if you have the courage to do so. That said, $250,000 lawsuit is anything to put a pause on a person's day. I will admit that. For other people on the call as well.
Hi, Colin. It's Robert.
Hey,
here.
Rob.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Just to piggyback on what you're saying in terms of fear of failure, I think that notion of failing to that point of no return,
yes,
is detrimental to the organization. But failure in the sense of, okay, we've learned from this experience. We were optimistic. Maybe we were too optimistic, and we didn't realize what some of the stumbling blocks were. So failing fast is another term in terms of, okay, we've learned and we're going to pivot and we're going to come back to something else. But I really like your notion of being optimistic and having the courage to kind of step out on the limb and not consider failure as necessarily,
the end all.
The organization or something like that. So
yeah,
that's great.
I think that this just comes with experience as well. And Rob, you've probably seen this, is just there are very few things in the world where you can colossally screw it up and not be able to propose some sort of fix or solution. There are a lot of problems, but there are always multiple ways to address it. And optimism is, I think, one of the ones that is absolutely central to saying, all right, we're going to pursue perfection. We're not always going to get there, but at least we're making the attempt. One that I think is very important for e-learning, obviously, is curiosity and learning new digital tools and understanding that there's always something new around the corner. There's always a new widget, a new plugin, a new app that you can use to incorporate. there's a lot of them now, and there's a lot more than there were 10 years ago, whether it's analytics tracking, whether it's scaffolding on curriculum, whether it's building new tools. Now, again, working for an education technology company, I could come in here and start swinging and talking about how great many of our products are for software and for education. But what I think is, in terms of stories, when it comes to e-learning, having the curiosity to go, I have no idea how this works. And technology can seem very imperceptible. Anytime you download an app and you open the screen for the very first time, you see a dozen icons and you just have this drop in your stomach where you're like, I don't know what any of this does. And keeping in mind, the same thing happens for our learners as well. They log into an e-learning. Many, their very first e-learning program ever. And we're saying, all right, are you ready to learn? And there's just a lot to go on there. With curiosity and understanding new ideas, curiosity is not something that can be switched on. It takes patience, it takes time. This is one of the ones that takes the longest amount, more so than learning to be a leader who leads with thoughtfulness or fairness. Opening your mind to that and keeping it open can be a great, great challenge. There's a few more people on the call. I don't want to pull names, but in the last couple of minutes that we have here as well, were there other traits that any of you kind of drifted to, or ones that you want to feel that you personally want to work at being better at?
I think I would just add that curiosity is sort of like a relationship in that it takes work. It's not something that you can take for granted. Maybe when you're young and you're fresh in an industry, you can take it for granted and you can assume that you'll always be curious. You know, there's so much to learn. But a person, especially in our industry, can really get bogged down with all the stakeholders that they're accountable to and all the demands of the everyday and the administrative side of things. And then you forget to be curious. And before you know it, 2 years or 5 years or 15 years have passed. And what have you actually achieved, right? Like that, if you don't put in the work to try and sort of spiritually, mentally rise above the fray sometimes and remind yourself that you should be curious and it's time to refresh things. I think a lot of time can pass without you really realizing that you've been stuck in one spot.
Yep, very well put. It's that hardening of the heart and hardening of the mind that you know kind of seeps in over time. Christine, I saw you had something to add as well.
Hi, Colin. It's nice to see you again. I just wanted to share a quick story. One I've seen happen many, many times. There'll be one coworker who'll share a new idea they're very excited about. And then the second coworker will just start picking away at it and saying, well, this is a problem. Oh, this won't work because of this or that. And then you see the first coworker go, oh, like you don't like my idea. You don't think it's going to work. And that self-doubt is kind of creeping in. And then the second coworker goes, no, I really like it. It's a great idea. Like they just jumped into that role of a critic like way too fast without saying that they like the idea, they think it's great. So just a reminder to everyone to, you know, if you think it's a wonderful idea and there's only like a very small thing wrong with it, remember to acknowledge how great it is rather than jumping in with that criticism.
Like the hamburger theory, you know, goodness is right in the middle, but you're kind of the top bun and the bottom bun are a little bit more of the critique. Same thing used that I do with cold open stories and writing and helping new writers learn and edit and adapt is how do you sandwich critique? I think kind of to bring it back to what Sally was talking about earlier about optimism is a lot of people just assume negativity right from the outset because they've been conditioned to by negativity or other things that have happened in previous experiences. So I think a way to combat that, Christine, is really that authenticity, being as real and as honest as you can when you provide feedback or you have everyday conversations with someone. That way, when they bring forward a new idea, they know that you're not speaking about, oh, I'm trying to, you know, make sure that my program is taken care of when I give an answer about yours, or I'm trying to, you know, play the game in some way. That really the conversations that you're having are crafted with originality and authenticity. Very cool. Thank you for adding that.
Colin, I'll add something here too. Nice to see you, Colin. Colin, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jana.
So hi. So one thing which I wanted to mention is going back to optimism and, you know, authenticity and perfectionism. I kind of want to combine all of this. So, you know, being optimistic, there is nothing wrong in being optimistic if you believe in what you do and if you know what you do is going to work, or at least you have the skills that you can teach the people. So as a leader, I think what what we all kind of, that's again my perspective. I think we need to know what we are managing, or where we are taking these people to. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, if I'm going to start a new platform, I need to have an idea how that's going to work. So then when I know that that's going to work, where I know it's possible, then I think I can inspire. You know, it's like when you believe in something, you can sell anything. So I think that's important. And when you start something new, you don't, sometimes, like myself including, I think we have expectations of everything being perfect, but I think we need to give ourselves a break that no, it can't be perfect from the beginning. So, you know, there will be some hiccups on the way down the road. So we have to have that, you know, patience for that perfectionism. So it will come eventually, but it can't be perfect right away. If it's perfect right away, then maybe, you know, there is nothing intriguing or nothing, you know, challenging, and people might not buy into it. Sometimes, you know, people like challenges and people like overcoming challenges. So if everything is smooth, they might not buy into it. So, but I guess being also authentic, you know, and telling people, listen, I don't know everything, but I know that this is going to work because I've tried it and it worked for me. So then people, I think, follow and you know, buy into that easier. So
very good. Absolutely. And that humility is central to thoughtfulness too. Thank you, Jana.
I'm gonna jump in now. Hi, Colin.
Hey,
I feel like saying it's really nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So I want to talk about thoughtfulness and authenticity. And in that sense of authenticity is being your true self, but also respecting other people's true selves, and really reflecting. And I think it's so important. This is something I'm trying to teach to my little guy right now, because he hangs out with people and he starts talking like that. I'm like, Alex, you have to remember who you truly are and how you want to present yourself. And you sound like so and so, and you sound like this rapper, and I don't want you to sound like anybody else. I want you to be yourself. So, and just finding his own, you know, self and pride. And I think we all can take from that, and always presenting our values and in our day-to-day roles, and whether at work or in general, and not just being in whichever role we are, we can reflect those values. And also thoughtfulness is super important. And again, thinking of others and thinking of what we say and how it affects everyone else around us.
So I appreciate you adding that, but also, and this happens a lot with kids as well, but we forget it as we grow older. You're not the same person that you were 10 years ago. You're not the same person you were 2 years ago. Getting the invitation to come speak with everyone today was a bit of a sobering reminder of how old I'm getting, but also to recognize how much we all changed. When you think about the people that you're working with, yes, we have core values and traits, but spend long enough with people, you'll see some of those harden in, but you'll also see how people can grow. And I think that it's more dramatic with children because there's just so many different, they're a sponge, right? There's so many different influences coming in, so many different things impressing upon them, the ways that they could act or are acting. They're also fleshing them out and seeing what feels good for them. But taking a look at your peers, the people that you're working with every day, and at the end of today, acknowledging how, and this would be my challenge to everyone, is pick one person on the call today and just reach out to them, someone that you usually do not speak with. Consider how you've seen them grow in the time that you've known them. Consider what changes you've seen, whether it's been over the course of 10 years of e-learning or whether it's been for 5 years or a year, because people are always iterating, they're always growing. Thank you.
Yeah,
How are we
hello,
for
Colin.
time, Whitney?
Yeah, hello, Colin. So nice to see you again in 1 month, almost 2 times, or talk to you. So yeah, it was really very, very informative. I was really enjoying following all the information you was talking here. So yeah, again, like Donna pointed out earlier, so, and when Sally also say, when in a group, if it's sometimes some people that is questioning, when we with the project and with that gonna help to really circumstance the feasibility of the project, of the feasibility of the to how we can manage it and how we can do it in the proper way. So it's a good sometimes to have not all the time somebody who say no, we cannot, or no, it's not possible, but at least to say, okay, well, we're gonna do it, but these are some this and this is things that we need to put on forward in order to success to make it succeed. So yes, it's I would say I really appreciate again seeing you, okay, and putting those ideas on front. Thank you very much, Colyn.
Thank you, Racine. Thank you very much.
Hi, Colyn. Nice to see you again. I know I started, you left not too long after I started, but we do briefly know each other. I think it was a great talk today. And one thing that just came to me, and looking at all these and seeing, I can see the value and importance in all of them. And for me, I really realized that sometimes I maybe value one of those traits more than the other. And so when someone doesn't meet that standard to the way, like I put such an importance on certain ones, like focus, for example. And so it really impacted me that, you know, sometimes people put more of a focus on fairness or curiosity than maybe I do, and that we all have different levels of how we view how important these traits are to us. And then often our conflict will happen because we just don't possess that same level. But me realizing that, oh, they're just at a different level of decisiveness or optimism or fairness or whatever it may be, just like I am for them. So we kind of need to meet in the middle a little bit more. That's kind of what I got out of today.
I think that's a fantastic addition, honestly, because it kind of goes to the way that you look at love languages, you know, like the 5 love languages of what's important within a relationship, and understanding that coworkers, it is a relationship. How many hours do you spend with everyone each day? It is a second family. It is a relationship that needs to be attended to and maintained and nurtured and cared for. So if you walk in the door and you're like, I am super about focus, and someone's like, yo, decisiveness, and you can see immediately how those two can brush up against each other, where you're like, I'm just going to focus on the task, and you've got someone who's like, yeah, I've got an idea, let's do this real quick, and you're like, but I was focused, you know, like that you can definitely see how the challenge grows out of that. But sometimes it can be about making opportunities to say, okay, after this call, are we going to make a commitment to additional team building? What is everyone's top 5 values? Like there's a thing that exists within where I work now with SMART, where people will actually have signage on their desk that does, you know, attribute to what their 3 core values are, or how they were feeling that day using different color icons. Now, this is different because we've started this transition back into the office, but it's kind of giving a flag when it almost creates a way to re-meet someone for the first time and get a good place setting to say, well, what's important to you? What's important to me? How can we share those values and do something great together? Or in kind of with the example you mentioned, Jeremy, with complementary skill sets. Not everyone is going to be the same. Not everyone is going to place the same value on fairness as curiosity. So understanding that and saying, okay, these are the values that person, you know, prescribes to. How can we, you know, reach a middle on that?
Yeah, and I would also say that it is context dependent too. Some people are very curious about one thing in their life, but not as curious about something else. So it's good to understand that, you know, sometimes our strengths are our weaknesses in some way, depending on how you look at it, right? So it's all about the balance. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think that's what we have time for today. But if anybody else has any questions that they would like to slide in there at the end, please, you're very welcome to. I think this has been a pretty awesome discussion so far. Okay, that might be it, Colyn.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you sincerely for coming here and presenting. I think this was a really beautiful way to cap off a day of maybe more technically oriented presentations, and it really sort of informs the people side of what we're doing here and right across nonprofits. So we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best, everyone.